Well, praise the Lord, church. How are we doing this morning? Can you believe this weather? This is absolutely gorgeous. Some people think it might be a little chilly, but no, it's good. It's really good. It's really good. Let's all stand before the Lord. Let's start with prayer. Thank you, Jesus. Lord, I'm so very thankful that we have a place where we can gather together to worship you, to magnify your name, and to learn more about you. I ask, Lord, that this message this morning, you open the heart, mind, and understanding of your children. Teach us, Lord, your ways, your commandments, your precepts, your laws. Lord, I'm asking right now that you bless everybody here, everyone that's watching online. Bless them abundantly. And everybody says? Turn around, shake somebody's hand, greet him in the name of the Lord. You may be seated in his presence. I said shake hands. Oh, bunch of huggy-buggy people. All right. This is Heritage Sunday. A little different than normal. The message is I think you'll recognize it right away, and it'll be good. I always pray, Lord, if I get in the way, move me out of the way. Don't let me get in the way of the message. That's the important part this morning. So this is Heritage Sunday, and the title of this, I don't know who titles these, but it's kind of odd. It says, Daddy, what's the big pile of rocks for? Not sure I would have titled it that way, but hey, whatever. So our focus verse is in Joshua chapter 4, verses 6 and 7. Verse 6 says, that this may be a sign among you, that when your children ask their fathers in time to come, saying, what mean ye by these stones? Verse 7, then ye shall answer them, that the waters of Jordan were cut off before the ark of the covenant of the Lord. When it passed over Jordan, the waters of Jordan were cut off, and these stones shall be a memorial unto the children of Israel forever. We'll see what the Israel's version of forever is. A little different than mine. Let's go ahead and put that picture up there. Thank you, sir. In northern Portugal, this guy was going to build a house for a local family. And these glacial rocks were strewn all over the place. And instead of pulverizing them or moving them or breaking them down or doing something else, he decided to use a couple of them to build the house. And it's called Casa do Penedo. I'm not Portuguese. That's my version. That's a Texas version. And it means House of the Rock. He built this in 1972, and like I said, for a local family, but they didn't stay long because the notoriety of this was so great, they were being inundated by visitors and sightseers all the time. And so to get out of the hubbub of life, they left. And so the new owners decided to turn it into a small museum. It's got pictures inside of the construction of it and everything else. And this thing is situated right in the middle of a wind farm. So it has all of these wind generators for electricity all around them, but this house has no electricity. It has all the other comforts of home. It's got a kitchen, it's got a bedroom, it's got a living room. In the living room is a couch, a stone couch that weighs 800 pounds. And all of the husbands are starting to sweat now going, yeah, I think it'd look better on that wall. No, let's put it, just move it over here a little bit. No, it's not moving ever. So, unfortunately, these attractions are great for tourists and everything else, but it's also a magnet for vandals. And vandals went in there and messed with it all the time. And so the owner had to put bulletproof glass in the windows, had to put railing around it to keep the people away and everything else. It's just the way it is. But when you look at the actual, just why it's there, it's kind of interesting that there was a problem with these rocks, and the guy decided, well, instead of just moving them and everything else, we'll just use them. And so really it stands as a memorial to the engineering marvel that it is, that they could do this. The thing's got 2 stories and everything. It's pretty impressive. So we're going to change up a little bit and start talking about the Jordan River. And so when Israel was getting ready to enter the promised land, they come up to the muddy Jordan River, and they're getting ready to cross. And Joshua was chosen to replace Moses, and we know all of that story. And so Joshua's getting ready to enter it, and the Lord is giving him these instructions, on what to do. And if you take a look at Joshua chapter 3, verses 7 and 8, and the Lord said unto Joshua, this day will I begin to magnify thee in the sight of all Israel, that they may know that as I was with Moses, so will I be with thee. And thou shalt command the priests that bear the ark of the covenant, saying, when ye are come to the brink of the water of Jordan, ye shall stand still in Jordan. So he calls the priests to the front of the line, and he's remembering, okay, I remember the Red Sea. There were very few that remembered the Red Sea, him and Caleb basically. And he remembered what God did, and he said, well, maybe God's going to do the same thing. And so he comes up to the Jordan River, and it says that when the priests step into the water, then I will back the water up. Now, if you remember the Red Sea, God didn't do it that way. He had a strong east wind that came, and he separated the water, and the wind dried out the land overnight. So it's blowing overnight. Then they crossed the Red Sea on dry ground and went into the path heading toward Mount Sinai. Now, if you do some research on the Red Sea, the narrowest part is about 10 to 12 miles. And in some parts, it's a couple 100 feet deep. So even though the water was pushed back, it was a pretty steep hill to go down into the bottom of the Red Sea and then climb in the other side of it. So it was tumultuous. The Jordan was no different. The Jordan was strewn with a lot of rocks all over the place. I'm sure some of the people complained, but as soon as the priest, the very first priest, started putting his foot into the water backed up. And every step they took, it backed up farther and farther until they were standing in the middle of the Jordan River. And it says, God backed the water up a far distance from the city of Adam, which was northeast of Jericho. So this thing was backed up pretty far. Now, the Jordan River is only a couple 100 feet across. And it was at the flood stage, so okay, a couple 100 feet. Probably wasn't that deep, but a lot of rocks strewn throughout that thing because the flow of water is not enough to move them or anything else if they just stay there. And I'm sure some of the people complained, well, he moved the water back. How come he couldn't pave it, make it nice and smooth? But God had a plan for those rocks. And so, God knows our frame, and he knows their frame, that no matter how miraculous it was, it doesn't take very long for us to forget what God has done. And he knew their frame was exactly the same way. There's nothing new under the sun. I mean, think about the 10 plagues, and all of a sudden, they're complaining and murmuring about no water, no this, no food. Well, I know you gave us manna, but we want meat. And are you kidding me? He just did 10 absolutely miraculous things. So even though you think, okay, so he's pushed the water back, they went across on dry ground. He dried the ground as they're stepping. Now, I'm a farmer. You get a rain, the water is not going to be, or the ground's not going to be dry for a while until it dries out. It was dry as soon as their foot touched the ground. And so because of that, we're talking some absolute miracles that are happening. But God knew they're going to forget really quick. So he tells them, I want 12 guys, one from each tribe. So there's 12 tribes of Israel, one from each tribe. Go back into the riverbed and pick up a stone. Now they call it a stone. I'm not talking baseball size or hail size or even bowling ball size. It says they had to heft them on their shoulders. So these were probably some pretty significant rocks. So 12 guys go down in there, grab a big rock, throw it on their shoulder, and heft that thing out of the riverbed. And they throw them down. And then Joshua tells the priests, come on out. Because remember, they're standing in the middle of this riverbed, dry, but it's a riverbed, for a while. So I did some research on, well, how long did it take? Bible doesn't say. The Bible is very clear about when they crossed the Red Sea, 10 to 12 miles across, that it probably took them somewhere between 8 and 12 hours if they stood 750 shoulder to shoulder across, coming across. Now remember, he backed it up a ways on the Red Sea and the Jordan. And so you're talking a long time to get 2.5 to 3 million people, plus sheep and oxen and cattle and camels and wagons and stuff. They're carrying their tent, their pots, their pans, and all of that. They're not just walking barehanded, they're carrying stuff. And so they did that in one night across the Red Sea. 10 to 12 miles. They were marching pretty quick. Now, if God can miraculously push the water back, could he miraculously, like, double step it? Don't saunter. We're not trudging through life. We're not strolling. We're walking. Probably. So in the Jordan River, it doesn't say anything about how long it took, but it alludes through the scriptures that it was about a day. Now, it's only a couple hundred feet at the widest, not very deep, but it was during the flood stage. But he dried the land out instantly so they could walk across. But you're still talking 2.5 to 3 million people and all their stuff. So they all get across, get the 12 stones, put them on a pile, said, priests, come on out. As soon as the very last priest holding the Ark of the Covenant steps out of the riverbed area onto the Promised Land riverbed, the Lord removed his hand and the water came back to flood stage. You would think that'd be pretty miraculous. And you'd remember that forever. No. It doesn't take much for people to forget. I don't remember what I had for breakfast, and it was only an hour and a half ago. Because it's not important. To me, that tells me that wasn't important to them. They're just glad they got into the promised land. So they pile the rocks up, and they make a memorial to remind them of what they just experienced. I like what this says. It has always been. Everybody say always. What does that mean? That means all the time. It has always been in God's plan for one generation to teach the next generation what God has done for them and what he can do for them. It has always been his plan. From Adam and Eve until now, it has always been his plan. We're the ones that don't fulfill that plan or his will. And so I like what David wrote, and I jotted this down. This is in Psalm 145, verse 4. One generation shall praise thy works to another and shall declare thy mighty acts. And so this has always been his plan to do that. So once they got to the other side, they put the stones together. Everything's going fine. We know the story of the Battle of Jericho. And before they actually started that, they kind of migrated toward a little village called Gilgal, which is about 10 miles north of the Jordan River, but it's on the outskirts of Jericho. And so they're sitting there, and they bring the stones with them. Remember, it's in the camp. Then they moved the camp to Gilgal, and they moved it there. And the Bible's talking about them and everything else. So they fight the Battle of Jericho. And all of a sudden, you don't hear about the stones anymore. So they moved them from the riverbed into the camp. They moved the camp to Gilgal. And they may or may not, there are some scriptures that allude to it, but they don't say specifically where the stones were moved near Jericho. And you never hear about the stones again. And so, what was the purpose of those stones? Let's look at Joshua chapter 4, verses 21 to 24. Joshua 4:21 says, And he spake unto the children of Israel, saying, When your children shall ask their fathers in time to come, saying, What mean these stones? Then ye shall let your children know, saying, Israel came over this Jordan on dry land. For the Lord your God dried up the waters of Jordan from before you, until ye were passed over, as the Lord your God did to the Red Sea, which he dried up from before us, until we were gone over. That all the people of the earth may know the hand of the Lord, that it is mighty, that ye might fear the Lord your God forever. And so he did this to remind them. So as children were going around and they would see these stones, they'd tug on mom and dad's robes and say, Hey, what's up with the rocks? What does that stand for? And you could tell them, this is what God did for us. And you need to remember that, and you need to tell your children, and tell them to tell their children, and tell their children, and tell their children forever. But all of a sudden, there's no mention of the rocks once they get past Jericho. So they moved them like maybe twice, and then they stopped moving the rocks. And then the memorial was gone. And then, probably the most depressing scripture is Judges chapter 2, verse 10. Let's take a look at that one, Keith. And also all that generation were gathered unto their fathers, talking about Joshua and Caleb and that whole generation that came across into the promised land. So now the new generation were born in the promised land. And there arose another generation after them, which knew not the Lord, nor yet the works which he had done for Israel. Because they didn't drag these rocks around as a memorial, the next generation didn't know the Lord, didn't know any of the things that had happened. They probably stopped talking about the 10 plagues back in Egypt, because that was what, like 2-3 generations. That was like what, 100 years ago? As miraculous as it was, You could ask any of the Hebrews at that time. So can you name like 3 of the 10 plagues? What's a plague? Well, when we came out of Egypt. Where's Egypt? I mean, literally. So that has always been a problem with mankind. The transfer of information, and I'm a teacher, and I was an instructor in the Navy and all sorts of stuff. I was an instructor at Fermi. I know how it works. If I know this much, I can teach and teach and teach and teach and teach, and the people that I teach will know this much, because there's no way I can transfer all of my information to them. And then they're going to remember about this much to tell the next group, and it goes down and down and down. That's part of the second law of thermodynamics. You have a system, and it slowly degrades over time. Everything does that. And so the same with the transfer of knowledge. So all of this is because God knows our frame. He knows us. And so there was a generation that knew not the Lord. Didn't know any of the miracles, didn't know how we got here. We just know we're here in this so-called promised land, but we're still fighting wars and everything else. Doesn't sound like too promising of a land to me, but hey, that's how we operate. That's how our brains work. They knew not the Lord. T.F. Tenney preached many times, we are one generation from extinction. He was talking mainly about the church. But you can put this in a lot of different contexts. So you know me, I jumped on the internet, which it has to be true, it's on there. And I started looking up all the different generations. So you got the greatest generation followed by the silent generation. And they went through World War I, the Depression, World War II, and Korean War. Churches were overflowing. Worship was rampant. Things were moving in a spiritual world. Why? Because people needed God and needed him bad. Because of all the bad things happening in the world, they turned toward God. And so churches were just flourishing. Then come the baby boomers, the beginning of technology. We did have Vietnam, but basically we had a pretty easy life compared to the generations before us. But you started to see a waning of attendance and worship in the churches. Churches started closing down. Churches started getting smaller. People stopped coming to church. Then you got Gen X and Gen Y. Gen Y is the millennials. Most of them are getting a different philosophy than their moms and dads and grandparents. They are forsaking going to church. Not all. This isn't for all. I'm talking about the majority of them are starting to turn away from God and church. And they're followed by Gen Z. Gen Z started out following the millennials. But if you take a look at some statistics, Gen Z is starting to turn back toward God. Why? Because they're seeing the condition of this world and they're realizing there is no answer except for God. So you're seeing more and more Gen Z coming into church, and you're seeing a revival of young people on campuses and everything coming back to church. Now, the one following them will be Gen Alpha. Those were people born in 2010 to 2024. And I put question marks next to theirs. Why? Because we don't know yet. It depends on us, on what happens to Gen Alpha. And following them will be Gen Beta, those born this year. So Elise is Gen Beta. What's going to happen to that generation? We don't know. It's a question mark. It depends on us. Are we going to tell them about God? Are we going to tell them about the miracles? Are we going to tell them what God has done for us and what he can do and will do for them? That is what is going to determine the question mark of what happens to that entire generation. Or will they be another generation that knew not God? God is called parents, biological and spiritual, because every one of us can, I want to call it parent in air quotes, someone else in this church, whether they're older, younger, or the same age. You can parent them. But he's always called on parents to be the teachers of the children. Now, yes, we have pastors. Yes, we have Sunday school teachers. We have youth pastors. We have all of this to help. But they are only there to supplement and aid the parents in teaching the children. The children are only in this church 3 to 6 hours a week. That is, can you imagine, okay, my diet is I eat 3 to 6 meals a week. How long do you think I'd last? Now, I'd last a little longer. I got some storage here. But once the storage is gone, I would be in trouble. Now, a lot of you skinny minis out there, you wouldn't last a couple days. You might last a week, but when the second week comes around with only 3 meals for the week, you might be in trouble. So it's up to the parents to teach the children. So they're talking about physical stones that were taken out and set up for a memorial to remind them not just what God has done, but to remind them to teach the next generation what God has done, and the next generation and the next generation. They stopped carrying the stones. They stopped setting them up as a memorial. Parents are great. We teach our kids how to tie their shoe. We teach them, help them with their school lessons. We teach them how to drive. We teach them sports. We teach them all this stuff. But we dare not miss teaching them what's most important. Let's go ahead and play that video, Caleb, and then we're going to wrap this.
Every year I get to teach a class called Modern Pentecostal Movements at Henscheid Graduate School of Theology. And as part of the assignments for that class, I assign the students to develop a heritage box. I learned this particular teaching device from a class that I took in my PhD program. The professor in that class, which was on teaching, had us develop a heritage box. I thought I was back in kindergarten and I was doing show and tell. The teacher instructed us to put artifacts into a box that would tell some of our life story. But when I watched that class progress and I watched students as they presented their heritage boxes to their fellow students, I recognized that something significant was happening. So when I taught the Modern Pentecostal Movements for the next time, I included that assignment. So in that assignment, I took a Bible that my church had given me when I was going away to Bible college. It was a Thompson Chain Bible. It kind of represented the fact of my home church involvement in shaping me into the person that I had become, ready to be launched into ministry. In that box also was a book that my grandmother had given me. It was a signed copy of a Howard Goss biography that she had purchased from Howard Goss many years ago when he visited my home church. So those two artifacts, in some ways, tell the story of my life. I am who I am today because of the church in Macadam, New Brunswick, that shaped me in my childhood and my teenage years. And my interest in history was kind of whet by my grandmother, who was an early member of that church and told me stories of what it meant to be an early Pentecostal. In some ways, they represent my connection to the heritage that God has allowed me to have. Israel was instructed by God to take some stones from the River Jordan and place them in a pile on what would be the promised land. And when young children came by and asked their parents, what is the meaning of these stones, that allowed the father or the elder to tell the story of how God had miraculously delivered Israel. It's important for us to understand where we've come from. If we don't know where we've come from, we don't really know where we're going. And the way we honor our heritage and the stones that we place in our life, whether they're in a heritage box or in a pile beside a river, are really not just anchors to our history, they're direction for our future.
Let's all stand before the Lord. I dare say there's not one person in this building or even watching online, and it doesn't matter if this is the first time you ever are watching something from church. It's not the churchy things I'm talking about now. It is your memory of what God has done for you. If this is the first time you're tuning in or showing up, it's because God is wooing you and drawing you in, and he wants you to remember the blessings that he's already given you. How many people woke up this morning? You have been blessed above measure because he didn't have to give you breath this morning. He could have easily said, no, you're done. So this whole thing about stones is not about rocks. It's about remembering what God has done and tell the next generation how you were healed instantly, miraculously, how he blessed you financially at just the right time, how he's done all these different things to bless you. Why? Because he loves you. That's what children need to know. There's a God in heaven that loves you and is ready to bless you. All right, so we're going to end this. I still got pages of notes. Whatever. At this time, I'm going to invite everyone here to go into the fireplace room on my right, your left, for some refreshments and fellowship. Don't run away screaming like a little girl. Go in there and fellowship with your brothers and sisters. Let them know what God has done for you. Let them know the blessings that he's given you already. And share those times together. All right, let's do that. Thank you.